Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching this from today. In today's video, I want to share with you my backstory. So how did I come to do what I do and why do I do it? And I think it's important to share that with my audience because there may be certain things that you resonate with from that. And I think it's always interesting to know. I always love to know, how people have got to where they are right now and what led them on that path. Now, for me, probably very similar to a lot of other people, mine started in childhood. I've always had a special affinity with animals. I was bullied in primary and secondary school. So I learned very early on that people aren't always safe. People aren't always going to allow me to be me. That was, obviously another thing, not being allowed to be me and being authentic and being bullied for various different reasons. So animals were my safe zone. They still are. I feel safe in their presence. And animals offer us one thing that you can't really get anywhere else, which is unconditional love. They don't judge us. There's no judgment. They don't care what we look like. They don't care what we're wearing. They don't care if I'm dressed or not. They don't care if I smell. They don't care if, my hair's short or long. They don't care if I swore. They don't, they love us. As long as you treat them right, they love us dearly. And so for me, they were always my safety net. They were always my go-to. And I'll be sharing some extra stories with you as we sort of go throughout this video today to allow you to understand that more. Now, I've always felt animals very deeply from an early age. So to give you for instance, we had a lovely border collie called Kiowa, and he had been in an accident. He'd injured himself in an accident where he'd kind of jumped through something and landed on a corner of something and ended up rupturing his bladder. And what happened from that was they said that, he needed emergency surgery. They said he wouldn't survive. He did survive. Excuse me, he was very steadfast and he survived at least a couple of years after that incident. But I remember one evening actually sitting with him at the bottom of the stairs by his bed and just being with him for the entire evening because something in me knew that this was going to be his last night with us. And when I woke up the next morning, my dad had actually taken him to the vet surgery to be put to sleep. And to this day, I really wish that I'd been able to actually be with him. And I did actually have to heal that aspect. Several years ago now, it came up that I felt that I'd betrayed him by not being there with him. I felt betrayed by my family in a sense by not allowing me that choice. Now, obviously, my parents were trying to do the best that they could. They thought that they were doing the best thing, but that was going to be very traumatic. I would have probably only been about 10, so that's a lot of trauma for a child to go through, to witness. But what they didn't realize is actually the impact it had on me by not being there, And so it's amazing how childhood experiences can affect us. Our parents are doing the best that they can, with the traumas that they've been through, with all the knowledge and the education they've had. But for me, I felt like I'd betrayed him by not being there, that I'd abandoned him in that one moment when he really needed me, and I wanted to be there for him. So I really felt, as I say, on that last evening, I remember seeing him shaking, and I just knew, just something in me, your gut instinct, your intuition, whatever you want to call it, I just knew. Now, I've been a highly sensitive person, an HSP, as it's called, an empath, and I've had psychic abilities and been clairvoyant since an early age. So right throughout my childhood, right up and even until now, I have had a photographic memory. And it wasn't until a few years ago when something said to me, just Google, is a photographic memory linked to clairvoyance? And I Googled it, and yes, it is. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've been doing that since I was yay high. So that was always there. My psychic ability has always been there, that ability to kind of tune in, to animals and to, experience, the other world, if you like, the ethereal realm. That's been there. And I remember one occasion when I was near the top of our stairs, and I remember seeing this lady floating across the hallway in a peach nightdress with a saucer with a candle on it. And at the time, I literally jumped near enough from the top step to the bottom step, and because it completely freaked me out. And I didn't tell anyone about it until quite a few years back now, and I mentioned it to my mum, and she turned around and said to me, "Oh, that was Mrs. Cole. She was the lady that used to live here before we moved in." Because I was able to describe this lady very well. And so that was an experience I had. I've seen I wouldn't have said pets from spirit, but I have seen spirit animals in the house that we grew up in, as well. That happened. I had a very shamanic connection, if you like, or what I would call a shamanic connection to ants. When we get the days where the flying ants come out, and our patio used to be streaming with these ants crawling all over, and I could feel them. It was as if they were crawling all over my skin. I was connecting to them, and it was as if I was the patio. And it was so bad that I used to basically get in tears and then having to go up into my bedroom whilst my family just sorted it out, because I could not be in the same room whilst I was feeling this, because I was just itchy and everything. So there's been lots of these experiences, more that I'm going to be sharing with you. But that's, been there since a long time. And that I've had plenty of animal experiences in my childhood, so I hand-reared wild kittens for my music teacher at the age of 7. Me and my brother both did that. So he had a stray cat in the garden, and bless her, she gave birth, I think, under the shed, and the kittens were brought into his conservatory, if you like, and we both hand-reared them together, and looked after them. My brother also worked at London Zoo and Whipsnade for some of his educational experiences later on in life. And I was very privileged, from that, to be able to go behind the scenes. And so I've been able to stroke elephants up close in that environment, and, watch an animal be under anaesthetic and see, obviously, just the setup. Obviously, we didn't go into theatre, we weren't allowed, and had just those behind the scene experiences that you wouldn't necessarily get if you went to places like that. My dad also had connections with I suppose, the marine keeper, as I would call it, probably not the clinical name, the marine keeper at Clacton Pier. So those were the days, sadly, where whales and dolphins were kept in captivity, and there were killer whales on Clacton Pier. Now, obviously, I don't condone that now. The surroundings would have been far too small for them, and I would never want that for killer whales or any mammal at all these days. But we had the privilege of being able to actually go up and stroke a killer whale, and see them blow water out of their blowhole, and it was an incredible experience, and I can still see it in my third eye. And again, when we then went on holiday to Flamingo Land, I must have been in teenage years at that point. And we were watching the dolphin show, and it was a family holiday, so our dad was there, and he was like, "I recognise that voice." And afterwards we went down to see them, and it was the same person. It was Peter Bloom, who used to work at Clacton Pier, who'd gone to work at Flamingo Land. And again, we were very privileged that actually between shows we got to actually play with the dolphins. So we played fetch with the dolphins, threw the ball into the water and they brought it back. And it was an amazing experience. And actually, I realized at that point just how clever they are, when they were playing with you. And it was just beautiful to be part of that. Again, they're experiences that you wouldn't necessarily get anywhere else. When you're a child, it was an honor, but very much to just see those animals up close and really get to know them. And as I say, see how intelligent they actually are. I also had an experience with my music teacher where I remember going to a music lesson, and he opened the door, and on his finger was a little bumblebee. And I was like, like you do as a child. And he was like, "Stroke the bumblebee." And I was like, "I can't do that. It's going to sting me." He's like, "It's not going to sting you, just stroke it." So I did. Bernie said, "Be very gentle, And I did, and I just gently stroked the heads of this bumblebee, and you could see them breathing. And again, that stayed with me to the point that, you know, if I find a bee that's struggling, I will normally get them on a leaf and I'll put them on my hand and I'll give them some healing, you know, and I'll gently stroke them and say, it's all right, darling, I'm here, you know. And yeah, people might think I'm crazy, but I don't really care. And you know, I will sit with them and I'll talk to them, and I've been known to do that, you know, and I'll get a saucer, I'll get some sugar water, you know, and put them on there and see if we can help them. And with some of them, sadly, they were, you know, too far gone, and they did pass away. And then with other ones, they didn't, you know, and they actually, you know, ingested sugar water, got the energy that they needed, got the healing that they needed, and they've flown off. So all of these experiences have kind of led me to who I am today, and where I go today and what I do. And as I say, these experiences have continued into adult life. You know, my psychic abilities have grown, mediumship abilities have grown. You know, I've got heightened intuition. So, you know, as I said, you know, stroking elephants at the zoo, helping my friend's cat give birth, bless her, and to stillborn kittens, and just feeling her grief and just being with her and giving her some healing and just talking to her and just feeling how upset she was. But likewise, there, one of the kittens had got stuck and it wasn't showing at all. You know, from the outside, you would think she was just, you know, she'd already given birth and everything was okay. But I knew something wasn't quite right with her. And she got taken to the vets, and actually she did end up having surgery and having the kitten removed, and also being spayed at the same time. I've hand-fed cheetahs, you know, or cheetah, in fact, at a sanctuary. That was an amazing experience. Granted, I did kind of come away and kind of count my fingers, and yes, I still have them. So I've been able to do that. But one of the other things that was just amazing as part of my business, when I first started, I used to do dog walking. And one of the things that happened was I was driving along, and I could just see in front there was a lot of chaos. I could see a dog running around. I could see lots of people. It's like, what the heck's going on? So I pulled the car over, stopped the car, you know, got out, walked over to everybody, and I was like, hey, you know, can I help? Like, what's going on? And they said, we're trying to catch this dog. You know, and this dog was just running around, highly stressed. There's people all over the place calling him, high-pitched voices, come here, no, come to me, come on, darling, you know, doing all of these things. And I was like, whoa, you know, if I'm feeling stressed and kind of oversensitized by this, then I'm pretty sure the dog is going to be feeling that way too. And so I ended up kind of doing what I do, that practical problem solving side of me kicks in, you know, that organizational side of me kicks in. I was like, okay, can I have somebody guarding that bit of the road so that, you know, we can stop cars coming? Can somebody else guard that road to make sure cars aren't going to stop? Can we have somebody behind me that's going to man that to make sure cars aren't coming up behind us? You know, please, would it be all right for me to have, you know, somebody got some treats, somebody got some sausage, I think, with them. And so I said, would you mind if I, you know, had to go myself? And they're like, no, feel free. So I said, okay, can everyone please stop calling them? And I just knelt down. Okay, I kept my energy calm, because I've learned over time, and the trainings that do, if you're stressed, they're going to feel that stress. You know, if you're in fear, they're going to feel that fear. So I kept my energy really nice and calm. I did a slow blink, just looking at them with a nice slow blink and saying, it's all right, darling, you're okay. Just trust my energy, feel that I'm trying to help you, okay? And I just breathed and I just sat with them. Now, it wasn't the easiest thing to do, because obviously time is of essence. You don't know whether they're going to bolt or anything like that. And I just started chucking the treats, and I chucked one like really close to him, and he ate it. And he looked at me, and I was like, good. I've got the eye contact with him. That's brilliant. I was like, good boy. Gave him the slow blink. Slow blink even means friendly. You know, cats, you'll see, do it a lot as well. If you do a slow blink to them, they'll do a slow blink back, and you'll see it. Cats do it between themselves as well. So I just kept initiating that, keeping my breath nice and calm, keeping everyone around nice and calm. You know, we're managing the physical environment. So it was like, right, so that's all kind of there, and that's sorted and secure. So let's just work with this. And gradually I would just throw the treats a bit further away from the dog. So he came a little bit closer, and then a little bit closer, and a little bit closer, until he got to me, you know, and I was like, yay, good boy. you know. And so we managed to get our hand, you know, gently through his collar, and it's like, right, we've got him, he's secure. And at that point, we were very lucky that the owner actually came from behind all of us and was like, have you seen? Oh, you found them. And they were able to take them home. So, you know, even things like that, where I've, as I say, that's not the first time I've used trust my energy with a pet, because they can feel your energy far more than you might even be able to feel it, you know. And I've used that with other pets as well, with other animals, you know, if they were unsure because they didn't know who I was and I wanted to try and help them, you know. I've actually said to them, trust my energy, feel into my energy. You know, you can feel that there's no malintent here with me, that I'm coming out of love, you know, I'm coming with heart. And they do, they pick up on that, you know. I had a horse do that who wouldn't let a foal come towards me because they didn't know me. And I said that exact words to them, those exact words to them, trust my energy, feel into my energy, because I know you can. You know that I will not hurt that foal at all. You know that I would be as protective of that foal as you would be. And they actually nodded. It was really funny at the time. I was like, oh my God. And they just nodded. And it was like, yes, I'm understanding you. And the next minute, they'd actually kind of brought the foal round so that I could say a quick hello. And so again, some beautiful experiences on that level. Now, for me, you know, for me, the one that was kind of the biggest one was when I actually went to visit the Big Cat Sanctuary, which is based in Kent, in Smarden. And it was an open day, so you can imagine there was lots of music, there was lots of people. I was with my family, and I remember going up to one of the enclosures, and Pan was one of the tigers that was there at the time. God rest his soul, he's passed now. And he was in his inside area, inside enclosure, you know, with all the straw or the hay. And I remember just looking at him, and I wasn't even trying to tune in. I didn't even know that I tuned into animals at that point. I had no idea. And I was just literally just looking at him, saying, how amazing are you, how majestic you look, how handsome you are. And I was just telling him these things. And then he looked at me like I had eye contact with him. And I gave him a slow blink, and I continued, you know, praising him. And then the next minute, I felt a wave of this one particular emotion. And I remember standing there going, oh my goodness, sweetheart. Oh, sweetheart, you know. And he kept staring at me, and I was like, oh my goodness, you know that I can feel this. You're aware that I am tuning into this, that I can feel you. And he continued to look at me. And at that moment, that interaction between us, it was as if no one else existed. I couldn't hear any music. I couldn't hear people. People didn't exist. It was just me and him in that moment. And actually, he was the beginning of really kind of my animal communication journey, and, you know, more of that spiritual side coming out. And I mean, yeah, he was the beginning of that, but I won't go into that because the animal communication journey is obviously a kind of another chapter, if you will. But one thing that happened to me, so when I started my business originally in 2015, I was actually just working with what I call human beings. I was actually just working with human clients. And I remember actually watching somebody doing energy healing with a tiger on YouTube, and I burst into tears. And I sat there and was like, okay, that's really weird. Why have I burst into tears? That's really odd. And something was guiding me to, I'd bought a book previous to that called Recovery of Your Inner Child. I think it's by Lucia Capaccioni, for reference point. And I remember being guided to go and do some inner child journaling, if you like. And so I did. And I journaled around, obviously, what had happened. And my inner child came out and said, I am really cross. I'm really angry that you're no longer working with animals, because at that point, I'd already been made redundant from the veterinary referral industry. That happened in 2014. So, you know, from that point, I'd not been working with animals anymore. And she just shared like how cross she was that wasn't happening. She really wanted to work with animals. Like there was this real like craving that I felt. And I ended up having this conversation with her and saying, okay, darling, I promise you, I will do this, but it's not going to happen overnight. I can't just wake up tomorrow and go, hey, I'm going to work with animals again. You know, I said to her, like, I'm going to need to do some training. And when I talk about inner child, slight digression, you'll learn more about this when we talk about personality parts. Okay. So bear with me on that when I start talking about inner child. But I said to her, I will do my utmost. Like, now I know that you really want to do this, like, let's do this. And it wasn't long after that that I then saw an advert. I'd been already trained in hypnotherapy and NLP. And it was after, obviously, that inner child journaling session, I saw an advert for somebody that said they did canine hypnotherapy. And I was like, oh my God, like canine hypnotherapy with pets, with, you know, with dogs, that would be amazing. And I got really excited by it and ended up actually, you know, talking to the founder of Canine Flow, which is Caroline Griffiths, and ended up training in Canine Flow. Then from that, I had already trained in Rahani energy healing, where we can actually work with that with animals. And I have done various animal courses since then. I've done energy healing with racehorses, thanks to two beautiful mediums around me, Malcolm Putland and Leslie Badgery, and had some lovely experiences with, you know, energy healing with racehorses. And again, using that kind of psychic side of, you know, them sharing a message with us of what they needed. It was self-selection. I think they selected hops and possibly blackberries, I think was the other one, but definitely hops, I remember them saying. And we then just passed that on obviously to the trainers and the people that were managing their stables so that they could do with that what they wished to. And so I've done many sort of animal healing courses. And then it was actually the animal communication journey. It was Pan, as I say, the tiger, that really kind of started that element of this journey. There was other instances that happened from that. So one of them that was that I had a friend who didn't believe in animal communication, didn't like me talking to their dog. So I actually started trying to do it telepathically. I didn't know I was doing it telepathically, but it was just a case of me talking to them in my mind, and something in me just very naturally believed that they would get that information. So it wasn't a conscious process. It was just, I'm going to do this. And when I started to see responses from him, I then continued. So that was the first instance of actually starting to see, okay, well, that's interesting. I've spoken to him in my mind and he's responded. Then what happened from that is I went to a friend of mine and they were all, it was all a bit chaotic, and they said, oh, we think the cat's pregnant. Now this cat wasn't very old at all, so she was more a kitten really. And I said, okay, well, what makes you, you know, what makes you think that, you know? And they said, well, she's quite round. It's like, yeah, okay, that's not boding well. And I said to him, okay, is the dog being very protective of them? Because he was a staffy crossed with a ridgeback, and the staffies are very, you know, maternal or paternal. And she said, yeah, he's being very protective. I was like, oh, okay. And then something in me just decided to try some things out. So first thing I did was I held their cat in my energy field. So held her by my chest. And you can use the body to get answers. So you can, it's muscle testing, but you're using the whole body. And I had already done this previously anyway. So I knew my yes and I knew my no, and I just said, is she pregnant? And I got a yes forwards. And I was like, right, okay. And I popped her back down on the table and I said, well, according to this way, she is, but you are going to need to take her to the vets. You cannot go obviously on this way as a diagnosis. And then I thought, right, let me try something else. And I remember basically, again, in my mind saying to the dog, is she pregnant? And what I got back was, yes. And I was like, whoa, okay, that surprised me. And from that, as I was kind of still processing that moment, the next thing that happened was I got a very high-pitched voice going, I'm really sorry. And when I turned around, she was actually staring at me. Now, in that moment, you know, as you're probably thinking right now, I really was like, am I just crazy? Like, did anybody else hear that? And of course they didn't, because it was telepathic between us all. And from that, I started dabbling, and I went to a park that is local to us, and I sat there and there was a pigeon just, you know, pecking up the, you know, bits of feed on the ground. And I thought, I wonder, you know, this is a wild animal. So let's see. So I did the same thing, and I just said in my mind, you know, what's your name? Do you have a name, darling? And I got back, Maggie. And I remember sitting there going, oh, okay, well, nice to meet you, Maggie. Thinking, and at that moment, I then got Sam. My name is Sam, in a really deep voice. And I kind of was a bit surprised, turned around, and there's this Canadian goose staring at me. And I just remember kind of sitting there going, hi, Sam, nice to meet you again in my mind, because we're in public. And so that was the beginning of my animal communication journey, because I then had a mediumship reading. They said, you're talking to animals. And I was like, oh my goodness, you know, because I never tell a medium anything. I always let them obviously share with me and give the yes, the no, the don't know, or I'm not sure. So I hadn't been feeding them any information. I'd never put it out as public. So nobody, even on my friends list, would have, you know, known that obviously that's what I was doing. And so for her to say, you are talking to animals and you are going to use this in your business, was a bit of a statement. And it took me a while to get used to it. But then when I did, I just thought, you know what then? I'm going to train in it. And of course, once you put that thought out to the universe, it's amazing what can then start to come back. And I then got shown a diploma in animal communication. I went and trained in it. And obviously, you know, that's where the animal communication side began as well. So this element of me with animals, I've always, as I say, been able to tune into them. And it's not just with pets, it's with wildlife. It can be animals in sanctuaries. I've been to various different, you know, rescues, sanctuaries, zoos, where I felt something is not quite right. And let's just say information has come out, you know, down the line that's been publicized, where it's like, yeah, I was right thinking that. You know, that I could feel there was something not quite right with that pet or with that animal. So just moving on from that side of things. So how did I get into kind of working with animal bereavement, with working with pets and spirit? That is a slightly different story, but all part of the same. So when my brother was a vet nurse, in his training, one of the things they have to do is hand rear. And he had never hand reared an animal. And they basically gave him this beautiful little baby kitten, obviously, who you could literally fit just about into the palm of your hand. And he had to hand rear her. So that was an incubator, bottle feed, you know, stimulate them to go to the toilet, all of the things that you do. And at some point, of course, you know, on that journey, they reach a certain age, and he needed to then obviously find a home for her. So he asked me if I would like to own a kitten, if I'd like to have her. And I was like, absolutely. And she was always feisty from the beginning. You know, she was always a cat that would chase you up the hallway on hind legs. She would be one that if you said to her, no, her ears would go down and her eyes would, and her pupils would dilate, and she would go after your finger. And even when I'd put my finger around the back of me, you know, by my lower back, she would run round after it. So she was always very feisty. Okay. So I'd had her since you know, we could fit her into the palm of my hand. And my little baby passed to spirit in 2016. And if you like, I would say our relationship was probably codependent. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but she was my everything. You know, she would only be okay with me in general. So she wasn't very good with any other person other than myself. She trusted me implicitly. I was the only one that would really be able to handle her when she did get quite defensive. You know, so she could be growling and spitting and hissing, and I would be the only one that would be able to pick her up and just hold her and go, it's okay, it's all right, you know, I won't let anything hurt you. So we always had that really, really close bond, but also to the point of the other way. Like if someone would come into the home, I would always watch her response. Always. And some of you might be able to resonate with this. You know, I always watched her response. And if she responded in a way of, I don't like that person, I would always take note of that. You know, and sometimes she would sit between me and someone else. It's like, okay. And she'd look at me and I'd like, and again, in my mind, I'd say to her, I've got it. I've got your message. I will be cautious. I will be careful. There's something you're picking up that I'm not feeling right now. you know. So we always had, as I say, that close relationship. And I won't obviously go into all of that side of things. There's a whole different story. But suffice to say, as I say, she passed in 2016, and I was absolutely bereft. You know, she was around probably 18 years old by that point. Okay, and just remember, I'd had her from a teeny tiny baby, and I remember her being put to sleep at home, and and they said she's gone. You know, that so the vet was here, the vet nurse was here, and they said she's gone. And I said, she hasn't. And obviously, as a vet, they were like, you know, and they checked her heart and they were like, no, she's definitely gone, you know. And I was like, oh, sorry. What I mean is, I can still see her soul behind her eyes. Her soul has not left her body. So, so there's obviously a definite difference. Her body, absolutely, her heart had stopped, her breathing had stopped, but her soul was still there. And it continued to stay there until I had someone with me who said, right, come on, we need to leave the house. And I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave her at all because I knew that she was still there. And we left the house. And when we came back, she'd gone. Now, at that point, obviously, I regretted ever leaving because it was like I wanted to be here for when she went. But I do kind of feel that actually she wouldn't have gone if I'd stayed in the home. She would have stayed for as long as she possibly could. So in a way, by me leaving, it kind of gave her permission to sort of let go. But I was absolutely bereft. You know, I remember my grief being so bad, I just wanted to blow all four walls out of my house. And if I had magic powers and I could do it, it would have happened because I felt so claustrophobic that I remember the nighttime when it got really bad, like sort of a panic attack in the sense, I actually had to sit in my porchway with my front door open to actually just allow myself to calm down. You know, that's how bad the grief was. But the one wonderful thing is that on the night that she passed, I heard this against my bedside lamp. And there was nothing, absolutely nothing that was close to my lamp that could have created that sound. And I remember I was crying my eyes out, and then obviously that sound happened and it stopped me completely in my tracks. And I sat there for a minute trying to just understand what had just happened. And the sound was the exact sound she would make when she rubbed the side of her chin against that lamp. Now, that wasn't the only experience I had from her from spirit. She did come and show me herself in other ways. But that was the one that started me on that journey. Now, with my grief, you know, with it being so intense, when I went to spiritual church, the one thing I wanted a medium to do was to bring her through, because I'd seen them bring other people's pets through just here and there. You know, I've got a black dog here, or I've got a white cat that's come through for you, you know, so they're just coming to say hi. And I desperately wanted somebody to do that and bring her through, and it didn't happen. And I sat there and I thought, my God, if I'm feeling like this, how many other people in this world are feeling this way? How many other people, you know, have such intense grief that all they want is for somebody to say, she's here, she's come to say hi, and she's okay. You know, how many people are just wanting that connection again? And so I was around an animal communication mentor at that time. I'd already trained in animal communication by that point. And I remember actually saying to them, I want to work with pets in spirit. That's one of the things I want to do. And I don't know how to do it, but I've seen mediums do it. There must be a way to do it. If we can bring through loved ones from spirit, you know, human loved ones from spirit, we can surely bring through, you know, our furry pet loved ones from spirit. And so I set about doing case studies to, to actually see if it was possible. And hey presto, it was. And everybody was very touched, you know, by these readings, by the evidence that I was giving them. Very specific things came through, sometimes nicknames, sometimes, you know, the likes, their personality, the way they passed. I had one lady, I remember one lady who I'd fed the reading back to them, and she said, that's really interesting. Some of that information I can take for the one that you're reading for, but some of the other information I can take for two of my other pets. And I didn't know who to ask you to read for between all of those three. So interestingly, I'd brought through a bit of each of them without even knowing that. And so both of us were quite stunned by that actually, because she couldn't decide who to bring through, and she'd gone for one particular one, that they all ended up coming through. So it was real proof for her, but also for me, that actually you don't always even need a photo. I didn't have a photo of the other two. I only had the photo of the one she wanted me to work with. So I had some profound experiences in that way. But once obviously I'd done these case studies, of course, then I had that validation, I had the evidence, I had the testimonials to say, this is possible. You can communicate with pets in spirit. And that's why I do this, you know, is because of my grief and how bereft I was when I lost Phoebe. All I wanted was for somebody to bring her through and say she was okay and give me a little bit about her. And so that's why I work with the bereavement side of things. That's why I do those animal communication readings for pets in spirit, to be able to, I suppose, in a way, energetically connect you back with their soul. Now, Phoebe, I've been able to meet with her in dreams, and that was, even now, it makes me emotional. It was the wildest and most amazing experience, being able to actually feel her fur, feel her purr, and be with her. And I remember waking up and just knowing that that was real, that I had actually, you know, visited the spirit realm, or somewhere where she was, where we could reconnect. So doing those readings, you know, has a profound healing on people, because a lot of people have experienced pets from spirit. And like me and my journey to start with, they think they're crazy. Like, oh, that must just be my grief. I haven't heard them. I haven't heard their bark or their whinny, or, you know, their claws on the laminate flooring, or I haven't smelt their fart, or whatever it might be. And I never ask people to give me that information either. But it's always a question I ask is, has your owner experienced you from spirit, and can you tell me in what ways? Sometimes they'll even share me ways where they're going to, so I can then say to somebody to look out for that. Okay, but most often it's them sharing with me that, you know, oh, well, I saw Mum putting daffodils in a vase the other day, and I'll say, can you understand putting daffodils in a vase the other day? He was there in that moment. And they're like, oh my goodness, do you know, I really felt like I could feel his energy, you know, I felt like I was being watched, but in a nice way, you know. I mean, I've literally tripped over cats in my space when I didn't have any cats. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I've picked up on Phoebe's soul. I've picked up on her being there at that moment. That's why I went to step over her, and then went to like, hang on, I don't have any cats. You know, and even other mediums that have, you know, friends of mine that have come here, you know, and they said, oh, there's a black cat running up and down. I'm like, oh, that could be so and so, or that could be so and so, you know. So it's that, you know, it's not even just my pets that have visited me from spirit. You know, I used to look after my boss's 3 cats when they used to go to Australia, and they visited me. And for some reason it's just coming into my mind now just to share with you. It's like digress really in terms of backstory, but there was one situation where I was looking after one of their cats called Emma, and she was at the vet surgery. So she had her own like great big pen and pod, so it was away from everything, where, because at that point she needed, I think, medication and that kind of thing, so she needed to be in a veterinary environment, but they wanted her to have a nice big space, where she had her own space away from other animals. And I would go in and visit her every morning and lunchtime and evening, you know, and say hi, because she was used to me doing that when her mum and dad were away. And I remember at one point I was kneeling down in the kennel and I was talking to her, and then I felt this figure 8 just to the left side of me, and I really felt that that was her brother Shadow. And then the next minute, as I was feeling that, she looked exactly where I could feel that. And I remember kind of doing that and going, oh my goodness, Emma, you can feel him or you can see him, I'm not sure which, because I couldn't communicate with animals at that point. Or not that I realised I could anyway. And she then looked at me And I was like, yeah, I can feel him too, darling. He's here to look after you, you know. So he'd come back from spirit to just help her, to be with her while she was there. And I don't know why they wanted me to share that, but there's always a reason these examples come up. So it might be that someone that's listening to this, you know, they've had that experience, or they need to hear that experience. So communicating with pets in spirit can be such a healing journey. It's certainly a privilege and an honor for me when I do it. I do sometimes get emotional myself, because some of the things that they share can be so profound, and highly evocative in terms of emotions, that, you know, I will go too. You know, I will be crying too. And I'm okay with that, you know, at the end of the day. And in a way, like, then when I feed that back, you know, to their mum or their dad, you know, I'll say to my kid, you might need tissues during some of this reading, you know, and they might not, but, you know, I will just kind of manage that expectation, you know. And when they share with you and validate that you have experienced them from spirit, that is a pretty incredible experience. You know, to know that, you know, you're not crazy, and that you have such a deep connection with your pet that, yes, you have felt them or seen them or heard them or smelt them, you know, it's a really big thing when you are grieving their loss. A really big thing. So they, you know, they do give you signs. You know, Phoebe gave me signs, you know. So yeah. So why do I work with codependency? So that's kind of, these are the three kind of biggest ways that I work with pet owners, with people. So I was codependent with my father until around 2022, when I had to let him go due to his toxic behavior. And I didn't really know that I was codependent at all. I didn't even know that was a word. I didn't know what it was, what it meant in all its entirety, until 2014, when we'd been made redundant. And for some reason, and I can't remember how it happened, but I fell upon, if you like, a book about codependency, and something made me look at it for whatever reason. And I started to see snippets of things that I could understand and relate to. And I bought the book and read it. I was just like, oh my goodness, you know, I'm codependent. And that was the beginning of that journey. And obviously, to a point, I'm still on that journey. I'm still healing that, you know, and I don't know when we'll get to the point where that is like completely healed, or whether we even will, you know, in this lifetime at the end of the day. But I've done a lot of healing on it. And actually, by reading that book and then starting to go on that healing journey of that codependency, that allowed me to gain the strength and the self-esteem to actually decide to let my father go. It wasn't an easy thing, but it was the healthy thing to do for me. And prior to that, you know, prior to that happening, I had, if you like, attracted in several experiences of narcissistic males who I ended up, again, having to let go of, having to, you know, release that friendship. And actually grieving letting them go meant that when I needed to let go of my father, I'd actually kind of grieved already. There was a tiny bit that came up, but hardly anything, because I'd already, all of those experiences, having to let them go for my own health and my own worth, prepared me for when I had to let go of my own father. And then, you know, from each of those experiences that I went through, there was always that period of reflection, of looking at, okay, so what attracted them to me? What traits within me, what behavior within me attracted them to me? What did I tolerate that I should not have tolerated? You know, how did I disrespect myself by obviously tolerating that? What needs to change within me? Now, that doesn't mean I was saying it's my fault, okay? You know, what I was saying was, okay, what do I need to heal within me that has been attracting those people, that personality? Because codependency and narcissism are on the same spectrum, okay? And anybody that wants to learn more about this, you can, there's a book called Rethinking Narcissism by Craig Malkin, I believe his name is. And if you read that book, that tells you a lot about kind of that side of things. So codependent is like an egoist, is somebody that's very passive, often a people pleaser, a rescuer, enabler. Everything's about others orientated. And I will be doing a season on codependency, but not quite yet. There'll be other seasons coming up to do with animals and with bereavement and, you know, animal communication and many more. But I will do a season on codependency. And then narcissism is kind of the other way of being very selfish, very me orientated, you know, everything's about me, everything's centered around me, nothing's my fault, I don't take responsibility for anything, you know. And so I went on that healing journey, you know, and as I say, I'm continuing to heal, and I will keep going. So every time, you know, something happens, I look at, okay, where am I being triggered? What does that relate to? What do I need to heal within myself? Now, that's most of what I want to share with you. And thank you if you're at the end of this video and you're bearing with us. Amongst all of those experiences, you know, remember that I've been doing training, you know, so my qualifications, I've done extra training in trauma, in narcissism. I've, you know, listened to summits, I've read books, I've researched. I very much have been looking into like pets and past lives and metaphysics. I've had obviously insights along the way of this whole journey where you're like, okay, that's interesting. I wonder if that happens with other people, and suddenly the universe starts sending you things that validate that, yes, that theory that you're thinking of, other people have had that, or they're showing you evidence of that. You know, I've had aha moments. You know, I've had it all clarified to allow me to then pursue my path and what I'm doing now, you know. So I do what I do based on all of my trainings, all of my knowledge, all of my research, the reading I've done, and the experiences I've had, both personally in my childhood and right up to adult life and where I am right now, and also experiences with others around me, whether that's clients and their pets or family or friends, you know. All of those experiences, all of that culminates together to the point where obviously we're at today, where I help people heal through their pets' issues. And we work together. All of us will work together to help that. So what I would say to you is, if, you know, what resonated for you in this video today, okay, feel free to share it. You know, feel free to share it, add a comment onto one of my posts, you know, and just share that with us. And last but not least, I'll leave you with my wonderful catchphrase: awareness is empowerment. Because when I become aware of something, it empowers me to think, feel, and act differently. So like with the codependency, I became aware of it, that that's what I'm doing. And that allowed me to start doing, you know, my healing, starting to change my thoughts and my beliefs, increase my self-esteem, stop enabling, stop being responsible for other people's behavior, stop people pleasing, starting to listen to my own needs, you know, considering other people's needs too, you know, but actually by being aware, I've become empowered to choose different, you know, to think, feel, and act differently. So thank you for listening, and look forward to the next episode. Bye for now.